that pulled my values into a place where it was definitely difficult to work on some of the stuff I was working on. But I don't think that anyone is to blame in a system. So systems work like this. Systems work through involvement, right? And I like to think about school systems just as a proxy for systems. In your hometown, I would guess that the school that is the best school is in the public school system is the school that has the most parent involvement. That's usually the common denominator always, right? So involvement is the most important aspect of a system and success of a system. Now, we have a food system that includes a lot of subsidies for corn and subsidies for soy and subsidies for beef that create a distortion of the system where if a company wants to give you really great food inexpensively, it's difficult. They have to go with that food that's been subsidized because it's already been bought down.
Right.
So the reason why $1 cheeseburger is possible is because your tax dollars have already paid for most of the cheeseburger through corn subsidies and beef subsidies, right? So you actually bought most of that cheeseburger, you just got to give them another $1 and then they'll give it to you, right? Through blame, we can say those people have, those fast food companies have messed up that food system. It's not really true. They're operating within a much larger food ecosystem.
Most visible transaction to the world.
And if we do that, if we just point fingers, we don't get individually involved. Who do I think is responsible for what's wrong with the food system? I would say you, But what I mean by that is and me, and everybody who through this radical transparency that's coming about, through the ability to easily talk to our congressmen and send notes and get involved, we still choose not to, because it's just not quite worth it. We're going to bitch about it when we don't like it, but we're not getting involved. When people really get involved in the system, then they will see the results of that involvement in a system that reflects what their values are. It will absolutely reflect their values.
There's a group creating a database online that tracks every company. I think it's mostly centered around food, all corporations and their socio-ecological effect. And I have to say, I don't remember.
You don't know the name. It's going to be less interesting.
Yeah, we'll insert that.
Kind of insert a little.
And everybody should go get that. No, it's basically using that crowdsourced model of how people find out, and people are making their consumer decisions based on these things, which is a great step.
But
to get the information out is the first step. People don't know that.
Well, most people.
Company X is one of the main offenders, and I can actually educate the people I know and say stop going to.
You can steer away.
Yeah.
So I think what we are, unfortunately, we're nostalgic about a broken political system, and what's mostly broken about it is there isn't as much participation as citizens as there is with corporations. So a citizen, say you're running, right? I give you my vote, right? Well, lobbyists there's gonna be $40 spent on you to talk to you per vote that you get, right? That doesn't include any campaign contributions, that's only lobbying. So what carries more weight? Special interests are more vigorously involved in our system than we are. The kind of radical transparency that you're talking about creates the potential for consumers to make a new counterbalance to all that weight that they're putting into the political system. And goodguide.com is one that I really have talked a little bit about and I'm really excited about. Daniel Goleman wrote Emotional Intelligence, also wrote a book recently called Ecological Intelligence, and it's great. It's a great read, really quick. And what it's about is the potential, to me what it's about anyway, I kind of combine it with other books that I'm excited about, but it is about the potential for us to actually vote with our dollars. So that concept's out there, it's familiar. If I say to you, vote with your dollar, it's not the first time you've heard it, but how do you do it?
Right. On a mass scale, that really makes a change.
Yeah, and so that it's super easy too. Like you're not gonna go online and become an industrial scientist on every purchase that you make, right? But through the beginnings of services like Good Guide, there is the potential where you could go online, you could say, here are the things I care about, because there's filters you could set. And you set the filters for where you want your money to go. So say you have an oil rig on your land, and you really love anything made of petroleum. Set those filters, and then when you go shopping, you can scan everything and say, well, this makes maximum use of petroleum, that fits my values. Or you may have different values, like you may
Good
want.
Guide is what I was talking about.
It's Good Guide.
It's Good Guide. Yeah. It's amazing. The power will be with the people.
It's the very beginning of what's possible there, but if you could get alerts, if you could say, hey, Good Guide, anytime I'm walking by some product that's a 10, just let me know, and it'll just buzz. You can walk through the grocery store, and it starts to guide you to the things that really match your values, and then as a shopper, you really do start to vote with your dollars. Interestingly, to me, why I think this has so much potential is, although corporations have learned how to, fend off government policy, they're dying to know what consumers are thinking.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Because the consumer has the dollar. So they're not going to try to change your mind. They're not going to try to, well, they may a little bit, but they're not going to spend a lot of time trying to say, hey, you consumer, you're wrong about your values. They're going to look at the aggregate of where the values are going and say, we need to shift.
The good news is it's all about influence. Now, influence is taking such a different, it looks different than it did 5 years ago, and the vehicle for influence isn't just advertising or just spending money on media and pushing it out.
Yeah.
Influence is not only congregating in these groups of people and social networks, but the people with the similar interests that you want to influence in that way are probably in your circle.
Yeah.
So if I find this information about this food and I find the Good Guide at the app, I'm going to tell all my friends.
There'll
but
be
it's
other
going to be the right people. So
Right.
your influence is not as difficult, and I think it's more powerful. And that's just going to keep growing, I think.
I was in Italy at the beginning of the summer, and you have to go, to all the cathedrals when you're in Italy, right? And I've done it before, and I did it again, but it was different this time for me somehow. And as I looked at the church-sponsored messaging on the walls, on the ceilings, and the sculptures, right, I saw that for the first time there is mass media. So that was mass media, right?
I never thought of it that way.
They made the cathedrals. Usually, if there was a town of 40,000, the cathedral would be made to fit 40,000 people.
Wow.
It was mass media, and it was extremely convincing. And after that, you had state-sponsored media, and now we've got corporate-sponsored media. There's always been a sponsor behind, and that's probably insensitive to say the church is a sponsor, but there is
There was influence. They wanted
with an
influence.
agenda and trying to influence that was behind the mass media, right? That was paying for the mass media. Last year, 30% of all the media that Americans consumed was peer-to-peer.
Wow.
Right?
I didn't know that number. That's amazing.
I didn't know that number either. And I would say within the next 2 or 3 years, that number will go over 50%. So very soon, for the first time in the history of humanity, more than half of the media, the mass media that we'll consume, is peer-to-peer, person-to-person. Humanity having a conversation that's well, I shouldn't say it's uninterrupted entirely. People are trying to ride on it, right? And people are trying to co-op it, but it's not sponsored by anybody. And that is a major fundamental shift that is a power shift too.
Right.
So that power shift is and that potential power shift of media into an actual democratic media. There's good and bad. I mean, there's scary, there's unfamiliar, but I like to be optimistic. So since you have a choice, I guess.
Yeah.
My optimistic view is if you could script this out and you were rooting for humanity to ultimately be the most powerful thing on earth, having their own media that was uninterrupted, unco-opted, uninfluenced would be a big, big part of it.
Yeah, and again, this is where the conscience of the agency culture comes in again. And a lot of people look at that and say, well, great, there's all this influence. How do I control it? Well, no. How do you get your brand involved with the conversation that is appropriate and influence the people that are interested in it? And it's about controlling and changing, Always what the first reaction seems to be, you know.
This may be optimistic, but I think that people are looking for companies that are aligning themselves around what's good for all of us, right? And I think they're beginning to punish companies that are not aligning themselves with what's good for all of us. So if I was looking at it opportunistically, right, I still would, my opportunistic look at what's happening with media, as if I was at some Corporation X, would be, how do we align ourselves as a company so that we are benefiting at the same time humanity's benefiting, and we make that very clear. Then you'll ride a tremendous wave.
Yeah,
I think.
I don't think we have to look so far back. I mean, look at, you remember the first time, I remember the first time someone came in and said, this brand, we got to get these guys green. Green is so important to these guys. And we did it because we wanted our brand to be portrayed as a good corporate citizen, which has always been a part of any good campaign at some level.
Sure.
The other side of it was it forced these corporations to do the right thing, you know, and be accountable. And I think that's very positive and not just idealistic.
I have a friend who's worked in, you know, being more environmentally conscious for a long time and trying to encourage companies to do the same. And she loves greenwashing.
Wow. Oh, she loves
loves greenwashing because she says, what happens when you greenwash, right? You either get slammed and you got to fix it, or you get complimented and you want to do more and do it better.
Right.
So that it actually creates that momentum that you're talking about.
That's true.
It's an interesting point of view. Maybe you did it for all the wrong reasons, but it still was a step into a world that then hard to back out of, and potentially leads to more.
Yeah.
So I actually think that makes a lot of sense, because even if you try it and it's absolute greenwashing and you get slammed, other companies get to learn and go, okay, we can do it, but we won't do it that way.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the Green Guide will brand that. I'm sorry, goodguide.com may expose a piece of a brand that is detrimental, and they may look at that and say, really, that's so bad? That was a decision we made on like an 8-cent, you know, differential in the vendor we were using, and they'll just make the change.
Why? Right? Why bother?
You know,
why bother to lose any customers for this little change?
Right.
Yeah. And that's the kind of, you know, data that's coming out of that is companies can look at real-time shopping behavior and decisions and then realize, wow, this food coloring cost us 5% of customers. Like,
right.
When we don't really need to add it.
Right.
You know, some of this stuff is just, there's no reason for it.
Right, and I think it's just going to make people examine the way they do things, which is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.